Now let's talk about the war in Ukraine. A few weeks back, Kiev launched a counter-offensive, did not achieve very much. It has descended into a stalemate, a frozen conflict. Ukraine's Western allies see this. A few days back, they tried a peace dialogue, the one in Saudi Arabia. Again, did not achieve much. So now the Western camp seems to have changed tack. They're sending out feelers again. They want to know the cost of a settlement. What will be the price tag? If the war were to end today, what will it take? That's what the West wants to know. Perhaps a sacrifice from Ukraine. That's what they're hinting at. Ukraine should be prepared to give up land. It's a big ask, considering we know Ukraine's stated position. They want all the territory captured by Russia to be returned to them. That's what Ukraine wants. They also want a complete integration with the Western Bloc, aka full NATO membership. That is Ukraine's wish list. But is the NATO prepared for this? Unlikely if you look at their latest statement. It comes from a man called Stian Jenison, the Chief of Staff of NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. He has floated a suggestion. He says Ukraine should give up some land to be able to join the NATO. A Norwegian newspaper reported these comments. We have a copy. The statement is unambiguous. Listen to what it says. I think a possible solution for Ukraine could be to give up the territory in exchange for NATO membership. I'm not saying it has to be exactly like that, but it can be a probable solution. Classic kite flying. He's also made some revelations. He said the discussions have begun, that key stakeholders in NATO are involved in these discussions. They're discussing Ukraine's prospects vis-a-vis NATO. Can it join the alliance? With what kind of status and so on? These are the questions they're deliberating upon. So will they encourage Ukraine to cede territory? Well, Jenison did not say that. He said it was up to Kiev to decide when the talks should begin, under what conditions, and what the terms of negotiation should be. But will ceding territory be a part of this conversation? Other NATO members are asking this question, at least behind closed doors. They're raising this question. What about Ukraine? What is their reaction? Kiev is obviously unhappy. It has slammed the idea. An advisor to Zelensky has called it, quote-unquote, ridiculous. Listen to the full statement. I'm quoting again. That means deliberately choosing the defeat of democracy, encouraging a global criminal, preserving the Russian regime, destroying international law, and passing the war on to other generations. That is Ukraine's response. They refuse to give up land, at least for now. And they remain stuck in the conflict. With all the Western weapons and support Ukraine has got over the last 1 year, it has not been able to make the gains it hoped to. The likes of America are now saying this openly. Last month, the Pentagon said that Ukraine's counteroffensive is moving slowly.
Things are going a little slower than some had hoped. There are very high expenditures of artillery right.
Despite this assessment, they gave more support to Kiev. In fact, the US made a controversial move. It gave cluster bombs to Ukraine. Even that did not help. The West wanted to see gains on the battlefield. So far, they've given more than $80 billion in military assistance to Kiev. But look at the map of Ukraine. It hasn't changed very much. Russia still controls about 11% of Ukrainian territory. After the much-hyped counteroffensive, Ukraine has managed to regain only 3% of the lost land. And the big prizes still remain with Russia: Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and most of the Donbas region, all under Russian control. The counteroffensive was supposed to change this map. It was supposed to force the Kremlin to the negotiating table. That has not happened. Now, the West cannot keep signing blank checks. They will have to reassess their options. Zelensky may want to keep the war going. He may even want to launch another counteroffensive next spring. But will his allies support him? The US is already under pressure. Recently, a poll was conducted. Americans were asked about their government aid to Ukraine. The results are telling. 55% Americans oppose the idea of more aid. They did not want more American money to be spent on this war in Ukraine. That's a worry for Kiev and an opportunity for Moscow. They're holding a defense exhibition as we speak. It's happening in Kubinka. Among the exhibits is this: Western weapons apparently seized by Russian forces in the battlefield. They look heavily damaged. The Russian defense minister who was at this event had this to say about these weapons.
As for the Western-made weapons supplied to Ukraine, I want to emphasize once again that there is nothing unique and invulnerable about them to Russian weapons on the battlefield today. In many cases, even Soviet-made equipment surpasses Western models in its combat qualities.
So Russia is building a new narrative and Ukraine is struggling on the battlefield. Is Zelensky prepared to sacrifice territory to join the NATO? A lot will depend on how his forces perform in the days ahead.